On May 8, 2013, a significant development occurred. The St. Paul Police Department received a call from a concerned citizen reporting a possible sighting in the Mississippi River. Authorities responded promptly. The recovery operation was conducted with great care and professionalism. The individual was then transferred to the appropriate facility for further examination. Forensic specialists utilized available records, including dental comparisons, to confirm the person's identity. The results left no room for doubt. It was Kira Steger. For her family, who had held on to hope during weeks of uncertainty, it was a heartbreaking conclusion. Because of the long searches, medical examiners were unable to determine a definitive cause of death. Dear viewers, thank you for choosing our video and our channel. We put a lot of effort into making sure you enjoy being with us. In this documentary, we explore the true story of Kira Steger, who was born on November 19, 1982, in the quiet suburb of Des Plaines, Illinois, a community nestled just outside of Chicago. She was welcomed into the world by her loving parents, Marcy and Jay Steger, who would always describe their daughter as vibrant, compassionate, and full of life. From an early age, Kira exhibited a natural charisma and deep empathy that made her beloved among family, friends, and peers. Her kindness, drive, and positive spirit shaped her into a woman who stood out wherever she went. Those who knew her often remarked on her rare ability to make people feel seen and valued, often pointing out the potential in others that they hadn't even noticed themselves. Kira eventually made her way to Minnesota, where she found employment at the Mall of America, one of the largest and most iconic shopping centers in the United States. There, she worked diligently for 2 different retail stores, becoming a trusted and respected colleague. For Kira, the workplace wasn't just about tasks and responsibilities. It was a space where she forged genuine friendships and created a second family. Her co-workers weren't just acquaintances. They were important fixtures in her daily life. They celebrated each other's victories and supported one another through challenges, creating an environment where Kira thrived both professionally and personally. Kira was known for having a keen insight into people's personalities. She often encouraged those around her to chase their dreams and to believe in themselves. She had many plans for the future, a future she envisioned as full of love, success, and personal fulfillment. With her compassionate nature and steady ambition, it seemed as though nothing could stand in her way. On Thursday, February 21, 2013, Kira was scheduled for a shift at one of the stores where she worked. Her demeanor that day was cheerful and upbeat, according to her colleagues. She had spoken about her plans to enjoy a pleasant evening out with her husband after work. It was going to be a simple dinner, perhaps followed by some time together to unwind, a typical evening for a couple sharing a routine life. At the time, Kira was married to Jeffrey Trevino. The two had met approximately 3 years earlier, and what began as a promising relationship soon blossomed into a marriage. Friends and acquaintances viewed them as a harmonious couple, with no significant signs of discord visible to the outside world. Like many couples, they experienced the occasional disagreement, but nothing that suggested serious trouble. Their issues, if any, were kept private. Even close friends and family were unaware of any major conflicts in their marriage. To all appearances, they were just another couple navigating life's usual ups and downs. But things took a strange turn just 2 days later. On Saturday, February 23rd, concern began to build when Kira failed to show up for work. Her absence was not just unusual, it was alarming. Kira was known for her punctuality, her professionalism, and her sense of responsibility. She was not the kind of person to miss a shift without notifying someone. Her colleagues immediately sensed something was wrong. When phone calls to Kira's personal number went unanswered, the worry deepened. They then reached out to her husband, Jeffrey, in hopes that he might be able to explain her whereabouts. Jeffrey responded by saying that Kira had left their home on Friday morning and had not returned since. He explained that this wasn't entirely out of character for her. According to him, Kira occasionally spent a night away from home, sometimes staying with friends or visiting family without prior notice. Although he acknowledged this behavior, he didn't express immediate concern, at least not initially. He also mentioned that there had been heavy snowfall recently, suggesting that she might have encountered car trouble or a dead phone battery, which could have caused a delay in communication. Despite his initial calm, Jeffrey eventually filed a missing persons report later that same day. He also contacted Kira's family to inform them of the situation. The news came as a shock to the Steger family. Kira was close to her relatives and remained in frequent contact with them. The idea that she would simply vanish without explanation was deeply unsettling. Her disappearance caused instant worry, triggering both emotional distress and a rapid mobilization among friends, family, and law enforcement. Law enforcement officials quickly initiated an investigation, as is standard procedure in missing person cases. The first step typically involves questioning close family members and those last seen with the individual. Detectives visited the Trevino home to speak with Jeffrey directly and to gather preliminary information. During his conversation with investigators, Jeffrey stated that he and Kira had indeed spent Thursday evening together. He described a pleasant evening: dinner, conversation, and even a game of bowling. After their outing, he said, they went home, where Kira had planned to watch a movie before turning in for the night. Jeffrey told detectives that the following morning, Friday, February 22nd, Kira left the house around 8:30 a.m. He claimed she had mentioned an important event at work that required her presence. According to him, she seemed perfectly normal, calm, focused, and acting in a way that didn't raise any red flags. He reiterated that it wasn't unusual for her to go off on her own for brief periods, and that, although they had been experiencing some relationship challenges in recent months, nothing appeared seriously wrong to him. He described their problems as minor, the kind of routine disagreements any married couple might face. Investigators pressed further, asking whether Kira might have chosen to stay elsewhere or whether there was any chance she could have been seeing someone else. Jeffrey firmly denied any such possibility. He explained that he had addressed that question with Kira in the past, and she had reassured him that there was no one else. He maintained that he trusted her and still loved her deeply. While continuing to question Jeffrey, detectives disseminated Kira's information to local patrol officers and nearby agencies. Flyers with her photo and details were distributed, and law enforcement began combing through local traffic and surveillance footage. In their quest for leads, officers also visited the Mall of America. They hoped to verify Jeffrey's account of the couple's timeline and to speak with anyone who might have seen Kira on the day she vanished. The Mall of America, located in Bloomington, Minnesota. It spans millions of square feet, housing hundreds of retail stores, restaurants, entertainment venues, and attractions. Because of the sheer size and volume of foot traffic it receives daily, security at the mall is handled with great care and vigilance. Naturally, the facility is outfitted with an extensive network of surveillance cameras, strategically placed both inside and outside, ensuring nearly every corner is monitored for public safety. With this in mind, investigators turned their attention to the video surveillance footage from February 21, the last confirmed date Kira Steger was seen by those close to her. They carefully reviewed hours of recordings to pinpoint the time she finished her shift. As expected, the cameras revealed Kira exiting her place of work as scheduled. Nothing in her behavior appeared unusual or hurried. Not long afterward, her husband, Jeffrey Trevino, appeared in the footage. The video showed the couple meeting up at the mall, spending time together in what seemed to be a casual, ordinary evening. There were no visible signs of distress, disagreement, or conflict between them. They walked calmly through the complex, eventually making their way to the parking lot. The couple then departed in their vehicle. The footage confirmed Jeffrey's initial account. Everything looked normal. However, in situations involving a missing person, the absence of suspicious activity does not necessarily bring comfort. As the hours turned into days with no word from Kira, the anxiety within her family escalated rapidly. The emotional toll was visible. The pain of not knowing her whereabouts, combined with the feeling of helplessness, created a tormenting atmosphere. Each day that passed without new information brought growing fear and sorrow. The silence was unbearable. Eventually, overwhelmed by concern and driven by a need to take action, Kira's family made the decision to travel to Bloomington to join the search efforts in person. Once there, They coordinated with authorities, but also began their own grassroots campaign to raise awareness about Kira's disappearance. They had dozens of missing person flyers printed, each bearing Kira's photo and descriptive details. These were posted on lampposts, storefronts, and community boards. Family members handed out the flyers to pedestrians and passers-by on the street, asking anyone if they had seen or heard from her. Their hope was that someone, somewhere, might come forward with a lead, no matter how small, that could help bring Kira home. While the family was making every possible effort on the ground, the investigators were continuing their own thorough examination of all available leads. They began conducting interviews with neighbors who lived near the Trevino residence. During this process, one of the officers observed a residential security camera mounted on the home of a neighbor whose house faced part of the Trevino's property. The camera was not static. It had a motorized function that allowed it to rotate from side to side, covering a wide range of angles. Investigators asked the homeowner for permission to access the footage from that camera, hopeful that it might provide previously unseen details, perhaps capturing any late-night activity or unusual movement outside the home. Simultaneously, investigators received Kira's mobile phone records from her service provider. These digital records opened a new chapter in the investigation. As they combed through her call logs and text history, they discovered that Kira had been involved in an emotionally significant relationship with another individual besides her husband. The man's name was Ryan Wendt, a professional acquaintance who worked as a manager for the same chain of stores that employed Kira. Their connection, it turned out, was not a casual one. The correspondence between Kira and Ryan was frequent, deeply personal, and stretched back for a considerable period of time. This revelation added complexity to the case and introduced a potential new angle for investigators to explore. At the time of Kira's disappearance, Ryan was reportedly on a road trip driving out of state toward Colorado. Given the nature of his relationship with Kira and the timing of his travel, authorities considered it important to investigate his activities further. It wasn't clear if his trip had anything to do with Kira's disappearance, but the timing could not be dismissed outright. Investigators needed to be certain. Was his relocation merely coincidental, or was there something more to it? Efforts were made to reach Ryan Wendt, and eventually authorities contacted him while he was en route through South Dakota. He agreed to meet with law enforcement and answered questions in Colorado, where he had traveled. During this interview, he confirmed that he had last communicated with Kira via text messages while on the road. These messages were exchanged just before Kira was last seen. According to the records, their final interaction occurred while she was dining out with her husband, indicating that she had remained in contact with Ryan during her last known hours. Investigators reviewed Ryan's phone data, including GPS locations tied to cell towers and credit card transactions, to verify his whereabouts. Everything corroborated his account. He was indeed far from Minnesota on the evening of February 21. There was no evidence placing him near Kira's location, and his phone's activity showed a consistent travel path out of state. As a result, authorities officially cleared Ryan Wendt of any involvement. He was no longer considered a suspect or person of interest. Still, one key detail lingered. The text conversation between Kira and Ryan had continued well into the night. Records showed that they exchanged messages up until approximately 11:44 p.m. on February 21. After that, Kira's phone went silent. There were no further outgoing messages, calls, or app activity. It was as if the device had simply gone offline, or been turned off entirely. As that timeline was being examined, a separate team of investigators turned their attention back to the neighbor's surveillance footage. The rotating camera offered sweeping coverage of the residential street where Kira and Jeffrey lived. However, there was one notable limitation. The camera's motorized rotation occurred at fairly rapid intervals. While this allowed it to scan a wide area quickly, it also meant that any suspicious or fleeting event could be missed in an instant. Investigators had to be extremely patient and meticulous, pausing and reviewing the footage frame by frame in hopes of catching anything significant. Even a glimpse, a shadow, a car, a figure, could provide a crucial piece of evidence. But with the camera rotating every few seconds, observation required a trained eye and great care to ensure nothing went overlooked. During one brief sweep, the lens managed to catch a partial view of the house for just a few seconds before continuing its programmed rotation to the right, leaving investigators with very limited visual data. While this footage was valuable, its quick pans and low resolution made it difficult to extract detailed information. Yet even with such constraints, detectives continued combing through the video frame by frame, hoping to uncover moments that might provide clarity. Jeffrey Trevino had shared with investigators his recollection of the night in question. According to his version of events, after he and Kira spent the evening enjoying a meal and a few games of bowling at the mall, they returned home. Once there, he said, they watched a movie together before eventually going to bed. This description painted a peaceful and uneventful evening between husband and wife. However, investigators remained cautious. They knew that memories could be selective, or in some cases, deliberately altered. As they reviewed the neighbor's footage, a detail caught their attention. Around 2 a.m., the camera recorded what appeared to be Kira's white Chevrolet reversing into the Trevino driveway. The exact sequence of what happened next was difficult to interpret. Due to the low video quality and the constant movement of the camera, there was little clarity. Nevertheless, within a short time, the vehicle was seen leaving the property once again. Investigators needed to know more. When asked about this nocturnal drive, Jeffrey explained that Kira had reminded him to refuel her car so it would be ready for her morning commute. He said that's why he took the car out in the middle of the night. Surprisingly, this part of his account proved to be accurate. Surveillance video from a local gas station confirmed that Jeffrey was indeed present there around 3:30 a.m. This discovery validated part of his story, but it also raised new questions. Most notably, why, after finishing up at the gas station, did Jeffrey not return directly home? Investigators traced his movements and found that instead of driving straight back to his residence, Jeffrey took a route that led him toward the highway. That unexpected detour sparked suspicion. The footage from the neighbor's camera did not capture him returning home, though this could have been due to the camera's rotation schedule. Because the camera only faced the house periodically, it was entirely plausible that he came back during a moment when it was pointed elsewhere. Still, the question of where he went and why remained unanswered. Further review of the surveillance footage yielded another notable moment. At precisely 9:21 a.m. on the morning following the couple's evening out, Kira's Chevrolet was seen leaving the driveway once more. Unfortunately, the angle of the camera did not provide a clear view of who was behind the wheel. With no clear visual on the driver, investigators were left in the dark about who had taken the car or what their destination might have been. Later that same day, on Saturday, February 23rd, Kira's employer reported her absence, prompting Jeffrey to file an official missing persons report. It wasn't until Monday, February 25th, however, that a new and significant development came to light. Bloomington police received a phone call from security personnel at the Mall of America. The call concerned a vehicle that had been parked in one of the mall's expansive, multi-level parking structures for several days without being moved. The guards had grown suspicious of the unmoved vehicle and contacted a towing company to have it removed. As per standard procedure, the tow truck driver conducted a brief external inspection of the vehicle before preparing it for transport. It was during this check that the driver noticed something unusual. There were unclear, smudged markings on the trunk lid that seemed out of place. Following his instincts, he chose to report the vehicle to authorities before towing it. Responding officers soon confirmed that the car was registered to Kira Steger. The discovery of Kira's vehicle deepened the gravity of the situation. Investigators conducted a careful examination of the car's interior and surrounding area. Inside the vehicle, they found Kira's handbag. Among its contents were printed documents, divorce forms, apparently downloaded from an online source. This unexpected detail revealed a potential change in Kira's personal circumstances, suggesting that there may have been unresolved tension in her marriage that had not been fully disclosed to friends or family. Even more troubling was the discovery made just behind the vehicle. Lying partially concealed in the slush and ice was a dark, rolled-up trunk mat. When investigators turned it over, they found discoloration that warranted further analysis. The mat was sent for testing, and when the DNA results came back, they confirmed that the genetic material belonged to Kira. This was a somber and heartbreaking development. While her physical whereabouts remained unknown, the implication of what had happened was becoming clearer. For Kira's family and friends, this moment marked a painful turning point. Up until then, there had still been a sliver of hope that Kira might return safely. That hope, though faint, was precious. The discovery of her vehicle and the presence of biological evidence within it extinguished that last glimmer. A wave of grief washed over those who knew and loved her, now burdened not only with loss but also with a host of unanswered questions. What had happened to her? Who had last seen her? And who could have harbored such animosity? From a law enforcement perspective, the case took on a new urgency. The top priority was now identifying the individual who had left the car at the mall. If they could determine who had been behind the wheel when the car left the Trevino residence at 9:21 a.m., they might get closer to unraveling the truth. Surveillance footage from the parking facility was reviewed. While the specific garage where the vehicle was discovered did not have coverage inside, there was a security camera trained on the road leading into the lot. That camera provided a useful lead. It recorded the white Chevrolet arriving at the lot shortly after 9:40 a.m. A few minutes later, a person appeared in the frame. The individual was dressed in a hoodie, their face obscured by the hood. Given the cold February weather, the outfit didn't raise immediate red flags, but the timing of their appearance, just after the car arrived, prompted scrutiny. The person was seen walking calmly away from the lot, crossing a street nearby and approaching a line of taxicabs stationed along the curb. After a brief conversation with one of the drivers, the individual got into a cab and was driven away. Investigators saw an opportunity to trace the person's movements further. If they could determine which taxi company operated the cab, they might be able to identify the driver, confirm where the passenger had been dropped off, and, potentially, learn the identity of the person who had last been with Kira's vehicle. By cross-referencing the time and location of the pickup with transportation records, police were able to identify the taxi company that operated cabs in that zone. Using the timestamp from the footage that captured a man wearing a hooded sweatshirt speaking briefly with a taxi driver outside the shopping center, investigators were able to move swiftly. Identifying the vehicle involved in that encounter wasn't difficult. Each of the cabs operating in the area was part of a regulated fleet equipped with modern tracking technology, including GPS systems that recorded every stop, route, and trip duration. Police traced the specific cab based on time and location. The GPS data showed that the individual in the hooded sweatshirt was dropped off just a short walking distance, approximately 1 block, from the home shared by Kira and Jeffrey Trevino. The ride had been paid for in cash, which is less traceable than a card payment, but the digital trail left behind by the cab's tracking system more than compensated for the lack of financial data. This passenger's behavior seemed deliberate, and investigators were beginning to build a detailed timeline of the movements in the hours after Kira's vehicle had been left at the parking structure. As the cab exited the neighborhood, its image was captured by the same neighbor's rotating surveillance camera that had earlier provided glimpses of the Trevino home. Just 2 minutes after the cab disappeared from view, the camera caught another figure entering the frame. A hooded man walking alone down the street. The grainy footage made it difficult to make out his facial features, but one detail stood out clearly. A white stylized logo displayed prominently on the front of the sweatshirt. Investigators watched as the man continued walking and ultimately entered the Trevino residence. Given the timeline of Kira's disappearance and the proximity of the person's drop-off point to the home, detectives began to develop a strong theory that the man in the footage was none other than Jeffrey Trevino himself. With enough preliminary evidence to justify it, investigators obtained a search warrant for the house. When law enforcement officers entered the property, the initial impression was that of a typical, well-kept suburban home. Nothing unusual or disorderly on the surface. But seasoned investigators knew that appearances could be misleading. What stood out to them were subtle yet significant signs that the house had recently been cleaned, especially in the couple's shared bedroom. Furniture appeared slightly rearranged, and certain areas smelled faintly of industrial cleaning agents. The forensic team began their examination, bringing in specialized equipment and chemicals to assist in identifying trace evidence invisible to the naked eye. When they applied luminol to the bedroom floor, the results were stark. The chemical reacted strongly, causing areas of the carpet to emit a bright blue glow, evidence that the DNA had been recently cleaned or scrubbed. Samples were collected and sent to a lab for DNA testing. The results confirmed the presence of Kira Steger's DNA throughout the premises, leaving investigators with no doubt that everything happened inside the house. This finding dramatically altered the direction of the case. Kira was no longer considered simply a missing person. Law enforcement now had enough evidence. As the investigation deepened, detectives turned their attention to Jeffrey's vehicle. Although a visual inspection of the car did not immediately reveal signs of a struggle or visible evidence, a more detailed search turned up an item of interest: a receipt tucked inside the car. It had been issued by a local gas station roughly 1 hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was abandoned at the shopping center parking lot. The timestamp on the receipt was critical. It placed Jeffrey in motion during a key window of time. Detectives visited the gas station listed on the receipt and requested surveillance footage from that morning. The video confirmed what the receipt suggested. Jeffrey Trevino was recorded at the station filling his tank. Afterward, he walked into the store and used an ATM to withdraw cash. The camera captured a clear shot of his face and, more importantly, showed him wearing a jacket that bore a distinctive chess logo, an insignia matching the one seen on the hoodie worn by the figure caught on surveillance near the shopping center. This connection between time, place, clothing, and behavior strengthened the investigative case. Law enforcement now had surveillance footage, physical evidence, and a timeline that placed Jeffrey in key locations before and after Kira's car was discovered. With these elements in place, police moved forward and officially placed 39-year-old Jeffrey Trevino under arrest. He was transported to the station for formal questioning and designated the prime suspect in the case. Upon arrival, Jeffrey chose to exercise his legal rights. He contacted his attorney almost immediately and, under legal counsel, declined to answer investigators' questions. While his silence was legally protected, it did little to dispel the weight of the evidence accumulating against him. Even so, for investigators, one critical piece remained missing: the location of Kira's. Until her were found, there was still an element of doubt that could be used in a legal defense. In the weeks that followed, law enforcement, community volunteers, and members of Kira's family conducted ongoing searches across multiple areas in and around St. Paul. They combed through parks, trails, wooded areas, and lake shores. In late March, roughly a month after Kira was last seen, a group of volunteers made a discovery near Keller Lake, located just a few miles from the Trevino residence. Resting near the roadside was a weathered bag that looked out of place. Inside, investigators found a pillow and a shirt. These items were carefully collected and sent for testing. Laboratory analysis revealed that Kira's DNA was present on the materials, confirming that the items had belonged to her or had been in contact with her. This discovery increased the urgency of the search in the area surrounding the lake. At the time, however, heavy ice still covered much of Keller Lake, which complicated dive efforts. Law enforcement brought in search and rescue divers trained in cold water recovery. Despite their efforts, the underwater search yielded no results. On land, search dogs were deployed in the surrounding forest and shoreline, but again, no further evidence was located. It wasn't until May 8, 2013, 2.5 months after Kira's disappearance, that a major breakthrough occurred. The St. Paul Police Department received a call from a concerned citizen. The caller reported seeing what looked like a person floating in the Mississippi River. Responding officers arrived quickly and confirmed that the report was valid. The recovery operation was handled with care, and the evidence were transported for examination. Forensic teams worked with dental records to make a formal identification. The results left no uncertainty. It was Kira Steger. Her family, who had clung to hope even through the most difficult days, were now confronted with the heartbreaking confirmation. Because of the long searches, medical examiners were unable to determine a definitive cause of death. This lack of a conclusive forensic explanation added complexity to the legal process, but the cumulative body of evidence, circumstantial, digital, and forensic, was compelling. Based on the physical timeline established through cell phone records, GPS data, video surveillance, and the forensic discovery of Kira's personal belongings, detectives began formulating a detailed theory. They speculated that the events likely took a drastic turn shortly after Kira and Jeffrey returned home out on February 21st. Afterward, evidence suggested that Jeffrey took a series of calculated steps in an effort to conceal what had happened. According to police, he used Kira's vehicle to transport her personal belongings and possibly other items away from their home. That same night, records confirmed that Jeffrey visited a gas station around 3:30 a.m., where he not only fueled the car, but also withdrew cash from an ATM, an action that would later prove significant. Investigators believed that the cash was withdrawn in preparation for a taxi ride the following morning. This foresight indicated an attempt to cover his tracks by avoiding digital payments that could later be traced. The following morning, the timeline continued to build. At 9:21 a.m., Kira's Chevrolet was seen leaving the driveway of the Trevino home. Surveillance footage later captured it entering the parking structure near the Mall of America, where it was left abandoned. Once home, it appeared that Jeffrey spent the remainder of the day attempting to clean and sanitize areas of the house. Investigators believed this was an effort to create the illusion that nothing unusual had happened, and that Kira had simply left for work as usual that morning. The implication was clear. Jeffrey had hoped to construct a narrative in which Kira left on her own, never to return, with her vehicle left behind at her place of employment to support the story. But the thorough work of law enforcement and the many surveillance cameras in place ultimately unraveled that version of events. By the time the case went to trial in the fall of 2013, the prosecution had built a compelling case grounded in surveillance data, digital forensics, DNA evidence, and behavioral patterns. In October 2013, after careful deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Jeffrey Trevino, then 39 years old, was found guilty. However, the jury accepted the defense's argument that his actions were not premeditated in nature. Judge Leonardo Castro announced the formal sentence. Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison. Under Minnesota law, Trevino would be eligible for supervised release after serving a portion of his sentence. Based on current calculations, his earliest possible parole eligibility date would be sometime in the year 2031.